All right, welcome in everyone to another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring the world of Bob Camblin.
Bob Camblin.
He was an artist, a thinker, and kind of a philosopher too, but he left behind a very unique collection of things.
He did.
Sketches, writings, and even some people would call them contraptions, these strange creations.
That's right.
We've got a few sources that we're going to be looking at today. We've got excerpts from some of his writing, a YouTube video that analyzes one of his, it's called a figure four trap creation, and a book review that tries to kind of tie it all together.
It's quite a mix.
It is. And by the end of this, I think you'll have a pretty good sense of Camblin's perspective and maybe come up with a few questions of your own.
Yeah, what makes Camblin so interesting is that he wasn't really well known while he was alive.
Right.
But the work that he did leave behind is just, well, it's full of these little puzzles and insights.
Yeah.
They're just kind of waiting to be discovered.
Okay, so let's start with his art philosophy. In his writings, Camblin says some pretty bold things about art.
He does.
One quote that really jumped out at me was, "Art is not just images. Art for art's sake has become art for life's sake, or art for my sake, or art for survival's sake."
Mm.
I mean, that's a pretty strong statement, don't you think?
Yeah, it really challenges the traditional way of thinking about art.
Yeah.
You know, Camblin saw art as being totally intertwined with everyday life, with survival, even with magic.
Magic.
Yeah, he saw it as a tool for understanding and engaging with the world.
Interesting.
It wasn't something separate or just for enjoyment or anything like that.
And he really didn't hold back when it came to art critics.
Oh, no, he didn't.
He said, "A critic is a legless man who teaches running."
Oh.
Pretty savage, but you got to admire the honesty.
Absolutely. Camblin was deeply frustrated with what he saw as an obsession with critiquing art instead of actually creating it. you know?
Right.
He really believed in something called participatory art, which basically means art that actively involves the audience rather than just having them observe from a distance.
Oh, so instead of just analyzing a painting, you might be asked to contribute to it or even create your own interpretation of it.
Exactly.
Okay, that's pretty different from a typical museum experience.
Totally. And that actually leads us perfectly to this figure four trap thing we were talking about.
The trap, yeah.
This YouTube video that we have, it goes into how this contraption changed over time.
Okay.
It started with a simple figure four mechanism, but then he just kept adding to it, making it more and more complex, fortifying it, almost like a fortress or something.
So I have to admit, when I was watching the video, I got a little lost in some of the technical details of the trap.
Sure.
Can you kind of break down the symbolism behind it a little bit?
Yeah, the trap, it isn't really about physically catching something.
Yeah.
It's more of a metaphor
Oh.
for how Camblin thought about power, control, and, well, the illusion of strength. He wrote a lot about finding a balance between resisting and submitting to different forces in life. And the trap, well, it really seems to embody that struggle.
Huh, interesting.
He even asked in his notes at one point, does the trap ultimately trap itself?
Whoa.
It's a good question,
That's a really interesting question.
isn't it?
Yeah, it makes me think about how, sometimes trying too hard to control something can actually backfire. Like maybe by building up all these defenses, the trap becomes too rigid,
Right.
and ultimately less effective.
That's a great insight, that is. Camblin's traps really teach us that true strength often lies in flexibility and adaptation, not just rigid control.
So, where else do you see this playing out? Like, maybe in your own life or in, the systems and structures around us?
That's something to think about.
Yeah, I'm going to have to ponder that one.
Me too.
But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, let's talk about this book review we have,
Okay.
It's trying to make sense of the massive scope of Camblin's work. From observing nature to, his deep philosophical musings, it seems like he was constantly searching for meaning in everything around him.
Yeah, and he often found it in the most unexpected places.
Like where?
Well, the review highlights his fascination with themes like stillness, impermanence, and finding meaning in the mundane. And all this connects back to his interest in Zen Buddhism.
Zen Buddhism.
Yeah, and the concept of the aimless mind, which might sound kind of contradictory,
It does.
but it basically refers to a mind that is open and receptive, free from preconceived notions and expectations.
So instead of trying to force an outcome or impose our will on things, we should approach life with a sense of openness and curiosity.
Exactly.
Let things unfold naturally and see where they lead.
That's the idea.
Huh, interesting.
And that's, I think, a key takeaway from Camblin's work, the importance of letting go of control and embracing the present moment.
Which is funny given how much time he spent on those elaborate traps, right?
It is kind of ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely seems like there's some tension there. Like maybe he was wrestling with these ideas himself through his work.
Maybe so.
But speaking of wrestling with ideas, there was this one quote from the book review that really stuck with me. It said, "This book does not promise answers, it offers questions."
Hmm.
And that just seems like such an accurate way to describe Camblin's approach in general, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that makes his work so engaging, you know?
Right.
He's not trying to tell us what to think. He's inviting us to join him on this journey of exploration and discovery
Hmm.
to find our own answers to the questions that he's posing.
Okay, so we've covered his art philosophy, those kind of puzzling traps, and
Yeah.
the idea that his work is more about asking questions than providing answers.
Right.
But there's another element to Camblin's work that I want to touch on, and that's his use of illusion and trickery.
Ah, yes.
It seems like he was really fascinated by how our perceptions can be manipulated both in art and in life.
Hmm. Yeah, that's right. He was fascinated by how we create meaning and how easily those meanings can shift depending on our perspective.
Yeah, it's like he's playing a game with us,
Yeah.
challenging us to question what we see and what we think we understand.
Right.
And honestly, I'm really enjoying the challenge.
Yeah, the playful element is definitely part of his appeal,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also like a deeper layer to it too, you know?
Yeah.
By using illusion and misdirection,
Yeah.
he's kind of forcing us to confront the limitations of our own perception,
Hmm.
showing us that reality isn't always what it seems.
And speaking of not always what it seems, let's go back to that book review for a second.
Okay.
The reviewer mentions how Camblin uses tricks of illusion vanishing acts, sleight of hand, misdirections, both literal and metaphorical, in his work.
Hmm.
It's not just about the art itself, but also how we experience and interpret it.
Yeah, he's playing with our expectations and assumptions, you know?
Yeah.
Like he might create a sketch that looks really simple at first glance.
Yeah.
But then it reveals all these hidden layers of meaning as you spend more time with it.
Or one of his traps, you think it's designed to catch something, but then you realize it's actually about how we can't control everything.
Exactly. Like he's saying, look closer,
Mm.
pay attention, question everything you think you know.
And there's this quote from his notes that really captures this idea. He says, "Fool the eye, fool the mind."
Wow.
It's like he's making us question the very nature of reality itself.
Which is a pretty profound thing for an artist to do.
Right.
He's not just creating beautiful objects, he's using those objects to explore, well, the fundamental mysteries of existence.
It's like those sketches he did of like decaying trees.
Oh, yeah.
He even wrote about them, saying as they approached the memory of songs and music stopped at the moment the texture of its decay became visible to them. Sad how we all aged at that moment in time. Salt Air Summer, 1967.
Huh.
Like there's this sense of melancholy there, but also, I don't know, an acceptance of the natural cycle of life and death.
Yeah, he's finding beauty and meaning even in decay,
Right.
which is a powerful message.
It is.
It's a reminder that everything is impermanent. And that's okay. In fact, it's part of what makes life so precious.
And he even finds humor in it, too.
Okay, down.
Remember that line about the goldfish?
Oh, yeah.
He said, "Your ego hidden and following you as gracefully as a goldfish's shit, folded under the waving tail." How neat that thought is.
Classic Camblin,
Yeah, so good.
finding the sublime and the ridiculous.
But it's not just about finding humor in unexpected places,
yeah,
right?
right.
It's also about challenging our assumptions about what's important and what's not.
Exactly. He's saying that even the most seemingly insignificant things can hold profound meaning if we're willing to look closely enough.
Okay, let's go back to those figure four traps for a minute.
Right.
In the YouTube video, the narrator makes this point about how the trap becomes more fortified over time, almost as if it's trying to compensate for its own vulnerability. And they connect that to Camblin's ideas about power and control. Like, he seems to be suggesting that the more we try to control things, the more vulnerable we actually become.
Yeah, which ties back to that question he asked, does the trap ultimately trap itself?
It's a paradox.
It is.
By trying to exert too much control, we end up limiting our own freedom and flexibility.
So what's the alternative? If trying to control everything is a trap, how do we navigate all the complexities of life without getting caught?
Well, Camblin seems to suggest that true strength lies in embracing uncertainty and adapting to change.
Mhm.
He writes, "In making the best of it, one should remember, there are no mistakes, you are doing the best you can, and mistakes are nature's way of telling you to trust your instincts, or the next mistake could be really bad."
Huh.
So he's not saying to be reckless. He's
Ah.
saying be willing to learn from your mistakes and adjust your course.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the process, even the messy parts.
Which also ties into his philosophy of art as well.
Oh, how so?
Remember that line, resist learning, learn to fail, learn to relax, learn to feel, learn how to really think. He's encouraging us to let go of our preconceived notions and approach things with a beginner's mind, to be open to new experiences and new ways of seeing the world.
And that's where the real magic happens.
That's it.
When we stop trying to force things and allow ourselves to just be present in the moment, open to possibility.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It is. It is. He talks about finding that mystic switch, that moment of clarity where everything just clicks into place.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying that the key to understanding lies in letting go of our need to control everything and trusting our intuition.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And that brings us back to that idea of the hologram he mentioned.
Oh, right.
If we're all interconnected, then trying to exert control over one part of the system will inevitably have consequences, unintended consequences.
I like that quote, two bits of a hologram arguing about which is the biggest instead of cooperating and looking at the picture with more detail.
It's like we're all part of this giant puzzle.
Yeah.
And we need to work together to see the bigger picture.
Exactly. And that message feels more relevant now than ever.
It does.
We're facing so many complex challenges as a society.
Yeah.
And we really need to find ways to collaborate and connect if we want to find solutions.
So what can we learn from Bob Camblin, this artist, philosopher, trickster who saw the world through a completely different lens, What wisdom can we glean from these enigmatic sketches, these paradoxical traps, these insightful observations of nature?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is the importance of questioning our assumptions. Camblin was always challenging the way we see the world, encouraging us to look beyond the surface and find that deeper meaning that's hidden beneath.
And he was a master of finding beauty in the most unexpected places.
Oh, yeah.
A decaying tree, a figure four trap, a goldfish's excrement. He saw poetry in everything.
He did, and he never stopped exploring, never stopped pushing the boundaries of his own understanding.
He was a lifelong learner.
He was.
A seeker of truth, a true original.
Absolutely, which leads perfectly into one of his most compelling quotes that you brought up earlier. When Zen monks say that we are always the Buddha, but we keep forgetting it most of the time.
Yeah.
I knew that, but now I know it.
It's almost like he's saying that we all have this potential for enlightenment.
Yeah.
But we need to be willing to let go of our egos and embrace the present moment to really experience it.
It speaks to the power of experiencing something firsthand.
Right.
Of going beyond just intellectual understanding to a deeper, more visceral level of knowing.
Yeah, it's like he's giving us the tools, the questions, the promptations, but it's up to us to actually do the work of self-discovery.
That's the beauty of it. He's not giving us the answers.
Right.
He's giving us the keys to unlock our own potential.
But before we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Bob Camblin,
Okay.
let's circle back to that book review one last time.
Right.
There are a few key points that we haven't really touched on yet.
Okay.
That I think could provide even more insight into his work and his unique approach to art and life.
Absolutely. I think it's worth taking a closer look at what the reviewer has to say about Camblin's fascination with illusion, magic, and the very nature of reality itself. Especially since that seems to be such a recurring theme throughout his work.
Yeah, the reviewer describes Camblin's art as riddles disguised as structures. I love that. It really captures that playful but thought-provoking approach he had.
It does. It's like he's inviting us to play a game, to try and decipher all the hidden meanings behind his creations.
It's not always easy, though.
No, it's not.
But I think that's part of the point, He
Yeah.
wants us to work for it a little.
Yeah.
And really engage with the art on a deeper level.
He was definitely interested in pushing the boundaries of what art could be.
Right.
He saw it as a way to explore the world, to ask big questions, and to challenge all of our assumptions about reality.
The reviewer even calls him a master of misdirection, which makes me think of those figure four traps again.
It is interesting how that keeps coming up, isn't it?
It is.
It seems like those traps were a way for him to work through some of his own ideas about control, illusion, and the limits of perception,
And maybe those ideas are connected to his interest in Zen Buddhism, too.
Oh, how so?
Well, the idea of letting go, of surrendering to the moment, that could be seen as a kind of misdirection in itself.
That's a fascinating connection. It's like he's saying, if you want to see the truth, you got to look beyond the obvious, beyond the surface of things.
And that brings us back to that quote about the figure in his work, you know?
Which one?
He says, the bound form, the bolted down pillar, is it stuck or has it found a peace that wanderers never will?
That's a good one.
Such a powerful image, right?
It really makes you think about what true freedom means.
Yeah.
Is it about constant movement and change? Or is it about finding a sense of stillness and acceptance in the middle of all the chaos of life?
Camblin was definitely a complex thinker,
He was.
and his work really reflects that complexity.
It done.
But I don't think he was trying to confuse us. I think he genuinely wanted us to engage with these big questions and find our own answers, you know?
I agree, and I think that's what makes his legacy so powerful,
Yeah.
He's not giving us a set of rules or a dogma to follow. He's giving us a framework for thinking,
Mm.
a way of approaching the world with curiosity and wonder.
So what does this all mean for us? You know, the viewers, the listeners, the people encountering Camblin's work today. What's the takeaway? That one nugget of wisdom we can carry with us.
I think the biggest takeaway is just the importance of staying curious, of
Mm.
never losing that childlike sense of wonder.
Yeah.
Camblin reminds us that the world is full of mystery and beauty, and it's up to us to discover it.
And to not be afraid to ask questions.
Right.
Even if we don't have all the answers.
Exactly. Maybe the journey of asking those questions is more important than finding the answers.
It's about embracing the unknown, the uncertain, the paradoxical.
That's where the real growth happens. When we step outside of our comfort zones, challenge our assumptions, when we allow ourselves to be surprised by the world.
So to our listener out there, what resonated with you most in this deep dive? What questions are you still thinking about? What rabbit holes are you going to go explore further? We've just scratched the surface of Bob Camblin's world, and there's just so much more to discover.
I hope you'll continue the exploration on your own.
Right.
Read his writings, study his sketches, watch the videos, just see where it takes you.
You might be surprised by what you find.
You really might.
This has been an incredible journey, and I'm really glad we got to share it together.
Me too.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep your mind open to the endless possibilities.
See you next time.